I'm here.
Good evening. Good evening.
Thank you so much for
Barely hear you though.
starting in another 5 minutes. Noel, you also?
I'm on. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being early on time and being prepared to participate in our session. Can you just nod your head to confirm that you're hearing me clearly? Thank you very much. Dr. Perkins.
Is it working?
We are all set and
Yeah, we have another 4 minutes or so to go. I'd like
Right.
to give people who are trying to make our 6:30 start time the opportunity to be with us on time. So in another 4 minutes or so, we'll begin.
thank you.
All right.
Your device is not working properly.
Good evening, Auntie Audrey. We are streaming on YouTube. So if there's anybody who is contacting you unable for some reason, we are still at only 39, but if it gets to the maximum later on, and anyone wishes to join on YouTube, they can simply do the search on the title, Who is Afraid of the Maccabees Bible or Holy Trinity? And it's also put in the chat that you can share it with anybody if someone comes on later on, or if they'd prefer to go with YouTube and not the Zoom session. So that has been put in the chat. Thank you very much. Dr. Michelle Roof is coordinating the technical side tonight. Dr. Anna Perkins will be moderating.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us once again for this presentation being made by Noel Wilkins on the books of the Maccabees and in this particular instance, on this whole question of the Maccabees Bible. We thank Noel for his willingness to share with us much of his research and scholarship, and we know that we'll all leave here this evening much more enlightened about the Maccabees and the Maccabees Bible. To begin, as always, we'd like to start off with a word of prayer, and we're happy again to have with us Archbishop Donald Rees, and we invite Archbishop Rees at this point to lead us in our opening prayer. Archbishop Rees.
Thank you very much. Good evening. In a brief silence, my dear brothers and sisters, let us place ourselves in the presence of the Almighty. We pause for a while. Jesus says, we're told, if you get it in my name, there I am. Let us pray. Loving, omnipotent, and merciful God, we humble ourselves before you and ask for your penetrating wisdom in order to glean from your scriptures those things that might make us ever hunger for you and to relish more and more your justice and your love as we relate to our brothers and sisters. Help us to see beyond our own individual preferences in order to encounter you deep within our very being. Through your Spirit given to us, may we grasp more fully your divine plan for the salvation of all and the divinization of those who submit to your ever that all may be one, even as you, Father, and your Son are one, in unity with the Holy Spirit, God, forever and ever. Amen.
Archbishop, thank you very much. We now turn over to Mr. Wilkins, who will have about 40 minutes to share with us who and why, who's afraid of and why we ought not to be afraid of the Maccabees. After which we will do as we did in our first session. We'll open up the floor to questions and comments. Feel free to use the chat feature. I'll be monitoring the chat and I'll invite people who would like to also come on mic and ask your questions. So there's the raise hand feature in the reaction button at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to use that as you participate in our discussion later on. So Mr. Wilkins, over to you.
Good evening, and thank you for all being here. And we will get straight into the presentation. I do have 3 quick comments. This presentation is focused primarily on the results of what was a research. It will explore the occult, and it's not a Bible study as compared to last week, which was a straight Bible study. So I'm just giving anybody any advance notice. If anybody has any challenges with discussions on the occult, I'm just giving advance notice. And we will be going through the Rastafarian perspective. Again, I make the disclaimer. And make no pretense about knowing or an authority on Rastafari. If you have any challenges with the information I have, I'm quoting directly from sources. So I will point out who the sources are. So we would be looking on what the Rastafarian perspective is of the Maccabees Bible, as that's a starting point we need to have. 2 quick points on that. As we know, Rastafari has developed over the decades, has been an oral livity, as they refer to it. There is no standard creed that holds for all Rastafarians, and there is no authority that tells all Rastafarians. So the points that have developed have been from the different sources and put them together. So I didn't find in any one location all of the points regards what is the Maccabee Bible. It's a merging of the different points from the different writers. And I will say that. I will again say thank you to, and I'll take this down quickly, so to make sure, take off the floating controls. I'd just like to start with additional prayer, the St. Michael the Archangel prayer. St. Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, O Prince of heavenly hosts, by the divine power of God, cast into hell Satan and all the evil spirits who roam throughout the world seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. So I give you the starting point of what we have found in the discussion. There are possible reasons, and I would like to encourage anybody who either knows of any other sources outside of the ones that I'm going to be citing on the Maccabees. Please, I welcome those to be put in the chat. And by all means, if there are sources that I hadn't identified, I'd be happy for you to identify them. So include that in the chat. I will be mentioning a number of anecdotal stories as well. You will be free to share those if you know of any others after we've opened the mic so that people can share. These are those that I've encountered or found in print, which is great. So at this point, I've only shared 4. There are 2 more possible reasons, but limiting the presentation. Fear of spiritual or psychological harm. And I'll give you an example of each of these at the start. Anti-Rastafarian sentiments, as we know, throughout the early and all through the decades of Rastafarianism, there have been anti-sentiments against it. And what we can see is possible a reaction to anything that is Rastafari. Their call for the Maccabees Bible could have a rejection from various segments simply because it's something from the Rastafari throughout those periods. So that could be one possible reason that we're going to be having a negative reaction to this document called the Maccabees Bible. There can be fear from the anti-Catholic sentiment, which is and has been some kinds of reactions of Protestants rejecting the Apocrypha. It is a book, those books are to be feared, and that's why they should have been left out. And the last one, which is points that I developed from my own arguments, looking at the research material, that there is an association with the occult. And there are 2 possible sources of this fear. Out of ignorance, many people are just simply told it can harm you from that perspective. And I'd like to propose as well the possibility of persons who are fully aware of the content of what is held in this document culturally referred to as the Maccabee Bible. They are fully aware of what is contained in it and would possibly give people an indication that there is material in there that you should be very concerned before you approach it. The picture that I've put there is a copy of a book which I happened done in the research, simply entitled The Original Maccabees Bible, and it was done by Dr. Roderick McLean, who compiled 4 books of the Maccabees. That's just another perspective. So before I go in, I don't want to do it at the end, because I don't want the last thing you're hearing is mentions of the occult and associating it with one of my supporters. And I'd like to highlight again at the start the support I've had from Bookland in New Kingston, and I do give credit to Susan Lee. They provide religious material, not just Catholic, but there is a Catholic corner for persons who wish Catholic material. But it's the same as a novelty company. They have just focused now on more religious material. So I do give thanks and give credit. And as I said, the only reason for doing it here is I don't want the last thing you see after we've discussed the occult is to associate it with Bookland. They're open Mondays to Saturdays, 10 to 3, and the contact is available there if you need anything. So let me begin with one of the Gleaner articles, which I was very, very delighted to have identified, because Mark Wignall, in discussing issues related to Jamaicans' attitude towards mental illness, speaks about an occasion where he knew this fellow who is called Smokey. And of course, take note of the nickname that the person has. It's Smokey. That should give you an indicator. And he sees him quite often, and he sees him dressed with these wires wired around his head with plastic balls, and he's walking around barefooted. And in conversation, he saw a lady who says, "This is my uncle." And Wignall says in this article, "Tough times and depression." He was going to ask her what brought him to this situation. But somebody close by shouted out, "Him read too much Maccabees Bible and it mad him." And Wignall's response, of course, is absolute foolishness. We need to cut out this foolishness, trying to attribute mental illness to the reading of the Maccabee Bible. And I met that on more than one occasion. People's responses, there's things in there that will cause you to get crazy. When doing a presentation initially at the start of my master's program, each of us were invited to do a presentation on our topic. And of course, I started by asking my fellow MA students who were Christians from different denominations, from across Jamaica, from different parts of the socioeconomic. So there was nothing consistent with them except that they were Christians doing training at UTC at the time. And I'd ask a question, have you read the books of Maccabees? And their responses were twofold. A, what's the sense, what can we learn from the books of Maccabees? Because it's not in their Bible. And of course, you guys who were present last week would be aware what was the value of it. So I explained that to them. Their response, all classmates without exception, all indicated they had not, and expressed varying degrees of apprehension, some even reinforcing the view that the books of the Maccabees had something to do with the occult or obia. And throughout my presentation, you will notice I will make a distinction between obia and occult. And most times I'll be speaking about the occult. And because of the obia being African retentions, I make a clear distinction between the two. So that was an example of the second case of people being afraid of it and associating. They've never read it. And when they ask, nobody explained to them why they should be afraid of it. They're just told, you shouldn't read it. It will harm them. Another anecdotal statement, and I kind of edited this one. This one is actually my aunt, who is an evangelical Protestant. And she actually, when I told her the title, she actually responded, "The Maccabees Bible, I'd never read it." I said, "Why?" "Because that is what the Catholics use to do them things." Further discussion, she demonstrated that she was referring to Catholics praying for the dead. So this misunderstanding or misinterpretation developed from the book of Maccabees being used by us Catholics in support of our teachings and our prayers for the faithful departed. As I commented last week, please do not think it's Catholics alone who have this liturgical practice. Orthodox churches and Jews also pray. And I include in the Orthodox churches a note here, Ethiopian Orthodox churches also. And there's a reason why I'm making that comment at this point in time. So this suggested here that these persons are associating the Maccabees with this sense of you're communing with the dead people, and hence you're having some kind of occult practice. And that I'd like to say, whenever we do this prayer, eternal rest grant unto them, O Lord, and let perpetual light shine on them. May the souls of the faithful departed, through the mercy of God, rest in peace. It is a prayer where we are praying God's mercy on our faithful departed. But that's the point. So on target, to speak about the Rastafarian perspective, we start with, of course, Max Romeo, whose song is well known in Jamaica in the 70s. And Max Romeo, in an article, a number of articles, was interviewed in the Gleaner, and he made it clear that he actually had the song working on a full year before he put it to the producers. And he indicated that many of the producers actually said to him they wouldn't do it, they wouldn't have anything to do it, because the Maccabee Bible was banned, and they feared reprisals because the book or the document of the Maccabee was banned. Interestingly, in that article, a point I note, which some people who having read the paper thought I was making too much of it, but just listen to the comment. Romeo also said and made the statement in context that he got to see a copy of the Maccabees. He didn't own one. A friend of his had it. And his comment was, it didn't look anything like a Bible. He went on further to say, those books that were banned, in addition, not just the Maccabees, there are other banned books. And he commented that those books were ringing in his head. We can't make anything factual out of it, but when we start to put the pieces together, you may come to see where I have drawn my own conclusions. He also said it's the mystical Bible of the black man. As most of us would be aware, I would have gone to at least check to see a number of different persons and who else to ask but Muta Baruka. So we had opportunity. Here's an article which he published, but I also got to ask him at a seminar what was his view on the books of the Maccabees or the Maccabee Bible. And of course, Muta Baruka makes it abundantly clear that he's an unorthodox Rasta, and to him, the Bible is comprised of stories. Not many of them he accepts personally. So in an article in the Gleaner by Cook, entitled A Way Out Reading of the Hebrew Bible, he commented that the Hebrew God was created by Moses, thus indicated a certain skepticism about the Bible, and by extension, the books of the Maccabees. So for him, the Maccabee Bible, there was no significance to him. So that just bears the point of this is not a universal concept or topic. I'll avoid the word of saying theology, but it's not a universal and universally accepted. So there are some Rastafarians. I did get to speak with at least 14 Rastafarians, not in formal study, all over the age of 50, and most of them were unaware of the Maccabee Bible as a concept. Here is the compilation, my resources, Max Romeo himself, Professor Barry Chevans, who I'll have quite a few comments from, Joe Owens, Dennis Forsyth, and Leonard. And I showed those last week when I introduced them. So here are clear statements, and if you'd say you can, and it is, if you look on this, you can clearly, without much difficulty, unravel what these persons believe, think, is the Maccabee Bible. So first I start with Joe Owens, where he says the Maccabee Bible was originally written in the Ethiopian language. Clear indication. I'd like to suggest to you that first comment literally eliminates the whole group that I introduced to you last week. Any Bible written in English would obviously be eliminated, and it points into one direction after that simple comment by Joe Owens. By Leonard Barrett, it was corrupted by later translations like the King James Version and the Catholic Bible, so that those Bibles were used to evangelize the slaves, the enslaved, would reflect the philosophy of European slave masters. So we would clearly know in this view, it's not the King James and not the Catholic Bible, as we discussed last week. It had valuable books from ancient original Bible, and this is foresight, that the Catholic Bible and the King James sponsored have removed. So the clearest indication is the Catholic Bible has 73 books, the King James has 66. This is saying if books were removed, then this Bible contains more books than the Catholic Bible with 73. Chavens invited that it had these mystical wisdom writings hidden from the majority of Black people. Please, should have made a comment with Chavens. Professor Chavens is reflecting research material that he has garnered by investigating and doing his research with Rastafarians. So these are not his personal views. Initially, I was a little disturbed when I saw one or two of the comments he made, and I'll share them a little later on, but I was pointed to the awareness. He's reflecting the views of his interviewees, those who had, had discussions with. Europeans altered by removing books like the Maccabees and others to keep hidden wisdom from Black people and to support slavery. Pretty much what was said a while ago. So we can move ahead. There were books that is claimed that the European translators were, in this case, not able to translate because they didn't know the language. So this is not Hebrew, this is not Greek language, because the translators of our Bibles translated from Hebrew, Greek, and to some extent Aramaic. So the suggestion here is some books were excluded because of the inability to translate from the language that it was in. And Joe told us what that language was at the start. And Romeo and a number of them insist that the books, the Maccabee, was banned in the 70s. And this is a statement that is repeated. Now, why do I say it is fairly straightforward in my view to determine what this book we're talking about would be? Clearly, there exists a Bible, and if Joe's statement is, and the Rastafarians have an inclination towards Ethiopia and Africa, then by all means, if there's an Ethiopian Bible that exists, it would uniquely fit the description carried so far. And as my research developed, and it was no great mystery to solve, there exists such a Bible. It's not simply an Ethiopian Orthodox Bible. This one is the Tweedo Church, which contains not 73 as in the Catholic Bible, but it contains 81 books with 3 books of the Maccabees. Please take note of interest. This book remained in the Ethiopian languages of Amharic or Ge'ez until 1919, and was only the project to publish it outside of those languages came along with Haile Selassie, who started the project, and it took a number of years for a number of different reasons. The war, the invasion of Ethiopia intervening. So it was not published until much later on. So it started in the 1930s as a translation, but doesn't arrive into our versions that we are widely available to us, or available until the 1950s to 60s. It does contain more books, 46 in the Old Testament and 35 in the New Testament. Some of these books being books that are readily available, some of them unique to the Ethiopia, especially the Ethiopian Book of Enoch is one of those unique to that. So simply put, I'd say half the work is done to solve the question of what is it that the Rastafari are referring to by those clues when we all put them together. So that solves the first question. But why is it that there is some fear? That isn't answered simply by this book. First theory, of course, if it were a Rastafarian book uniquely, then that would justify why people would fear the Rastafarian book. But this would have been a standard Ethiopian Orthodox Bible, so to speak. We had the emperor coming to visit Jamaica in early 1960s, a relationship between the governments of Haile Selassie and our local governments, and a relationship built there. Why then would this Bible, if this were the book that is being referred to between the 60s and the 70s, be banned if it's a standard text, so to speak? And did it appear on the banned list for some reason? I'd like to propose there is more information for us to glean, which in my view takes us away from the Ethiopian Orthodox Bible into another direction. And this is the core points of my thesis, based on what we're about to see. Please be muted. So Professor Chavans, in his recounting of the early Rastafari founders, quoted and on more than one occasion mentioned the books of the Maccabee with the books of the Lawrence. I'll speak to that in a few seconds. And he's again, remember, he's now quoting persons who are sources. Chavans did not support any of his observations or the idea of hidden knowledge or mystical secrets by giving us any references or data contained in the books of the Maccabees. So in none of the sources I saw, maybe there are, if anybody else sees them, you can point it out to me, but he does not show in the books of the Maccabees what the hidden secret is in his research. It's only claimed that there are hidden secrets. I gave you an outline of the books of the Maccabees last week. Haven't seen any hidden secrets in the books. Now, Romeo, Chavans, Forsyth, and some Rastafarians indicate that the Maccabee either possess hidden truths or ancient mystical wisdom. And the authorities, as we know, have been trying to hide this wisdom from the Black people. And hence their attempt to ban the book of the Maccabees and by extension in the period of the 60s. Can we have that person muted, please? So here is direct data from Professor Chavans. Teacher Hibbert was one of the founding fathers of Rastafarianism, and in forming his organization, one of the cornerstones was occultism, the feeling that there were hidden secrets in the books of Maccabees or in the publications of the Lawrence. And this was a sentiment that differentiated between Hibbert in his foundation of Rastafari as welcome, Reverend Taylor. Good to see you on. So if you want the quotation, it's in Barry Chavans' book, Rastafari. But he starts to make association between the books of Maccabees with the De Lawrence publications in the same sentence. He further says, Hibbert's occult activity was also associated with the Freemasons. And this is a quotation from Forsyth. Forsyth indicates that Hibbert had been a Freemason, a member of the ancient order of Ethiopia, and was familiar with ancient mystical traditions. He also claimed that Hibbert returned to Jamaica and founded the Ethiopian mystic Masons after his return to Jamaica. Chavans, Professor Chavans again, makes this association. Numerous occult occasions, including, and in this sentence, sorry, I took it out a little bit, but I find this extremely, and this is one of the quotes that was really unsettling. But of course, he's not quoting his own knowledge. Professor Chavans has Catholic background, so he knows what's in the Catholic Bible. But here is what he's quoting from those who interviewed. There was a fascination with the De Lawrence, and that's not the correct spelling of De Lawrence, publications such as, and listen to the title of this book, everybody, the 6th and 7th books of Moses. Please keep that title in the back of your head for a few minutes. But he quotes, and in that same sentence, he's quoting people who he interviewed. They associate the 6th and 7th books of Moses, which is a book published by De Lawrence, Masonic lodges, Hindu mysticism, Roman Catholicism, the books of the Maccabees, and the Egyptian Book of the Dead. The Egyptian Book of the Dead is also a book on the occult. So here we're seeing that this reporter is indicating to us that there's an association between the 6th and 7th books of Moses, a De Lawrence book. That's not a Christian book of which Moses wrote the 6th and 7th books. It is a straightforward book on the occult. Here he's associating Roman Catholicism in the same breath with Hindu mysticism, in the same breath with this other book, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, which is a clearly occult book. So we start to see a development of occult language. I would like to say now, one of the things I readily went and checked, what were the books that were officially banned on our list from 1965? And there are many debates around this. And not surprising to me, of course, was when I checked this list in 65 and updated in 76, with a brief period where there's a change of government from the JLP, and we know there are stories about former Prime Minister Scheer and the JLP banning books, both Black Power books, etc., etc., etc. Also, Howell's books after his revolt were also banned. When I checked the literature, it indicated the reason for Howell's books being banned were his quote-unquote themes of guerrilla warfare. Now, Dr. Perkins pointed out to me, hey, the book of Maccabees is rich with guerrilla warfare in it, and that is so true. What was on the list in 1965, and may I say continues to be on the list today, and why I made mention of the updates in 76, there was a change of government. Prime Minister Michael Manley came in 72. They revised the list, took off the Black Power books, and there are a number of articles that have been written to argue how is it, Michael Manley and his government took off the Black Power books, but left the books related to this topic on. Another debate. So notice that book a while ago that I mentioned, the 6th and 7th book of Moses, has been a banned book on the list. It is a publication of De Lawrence and Scott Company and has been banned, not singularly in Jamaica. These books were published by De Lawrence and distributed by mail order through Africa, United States, Europe, Central and South America. So De Lawrence is a publisher, a person and a company who was distributing books on the occult, as distribution started about 1910. I'll double check the date, 1865, 1910. But this one is definitely on the list and remains on the list today. So there are 8 books on the list. 6th and 7th book of Moses are on the list. There are no Rastafarian publications that I saw on this list, nor were the books of Maccabees or any Bible, nor the Ethiopian Orthodox Bible listed on these lists that I saw and was available. If they were on and taken off, I will stand on that point that it could be. Owens also makes a comment, and it's in the book. The Apocrypha, again, we talk about the Apocrypha. He's a Jesuit. He knows what the Apocrypha and De Laurenti's magical books reveal certain portions of what has been hidden by the white man up to now. But there is still more to be revealed. And you've heard in music the half that had never been told. He quotes the half have never been told by referring to these books that have been excluded and prevented people on this side of the continent, of the globe, to be familiar with. Because I would like to point out the books that are in the Ethiopian Orthodox are available, have been available, and as best as I know, are not banned in the context of Jamaica's laws. So the publication has no Bible, and that's consistent. I want to end with this point and then open it up to discussion. In reading, Shavans also and other people have made a reference to Catholic science, not spelled this way. And I'd just like to inform and then stop after this for opening the floor. So, is there something called Catholic science? Notice this isn't the Jamaican. So there are more than, I would say, 250 scientists, not simply with PhDs, over the centuries, at the highest level of academia in many areas of, from all of the areas. And these scientists have been well recognized while still being priests in the Catholic Church. So they've contributed, whether Jesuits or Dominicans. So let's look on one Dominican, Albert the Great. There's a statue of Albert the Great, Albertus Magnus, and it's actually in St. Joseph's Hospital, if they haven't removed it, right at the staircase. So why? In the Middle Ages, he was one of the great scientists, but he wasn't called great because of his science work. He wrote books on botany, astronomy, chemistry, physics, biology, geography, logic, and you see the list: psychology, metaphysics, mineralogy, zoology. He died in 1200s. In 1931, he was declared both a saint and a doctor of the church. Very few people are called the great in the church. Leo the Great. He was also in 1941 named patron saint of natural sciences. I know you're wondering, where does this fit into our discussion? And that is a little bit of a detour there. There is a book called The Secrets of Albertus Magnus. There's also a book called Egyptian Secrets of Albertus Magnus. That's the French edition. I will simply say two things. On the surface, it appears to be attributed to this Albertus Magnus the Great. However, in truth and in fact, it's a book from the 1700s. It's actually a book on the occult. And there are my sources to simply say you are going to find a number of books that have been attributed to scientists who happen to be priests, who happen to be Catholic, and the books are only attributed to them. The sources actually go on to explain it has nothing, the Egyptian Secrets of Albertus Magnus has nothing to do with Egypt, but rather Egyptian is used to refer to gypsies, more popular the Roma, based on the mistaken belief that this diverse ethnic group originated in Egypt, erroneous. Here again, you will find there is misinformation and associating the occult with Catholicism. And I found in a number of the references that Professor Shavans made, it is not difficult to see why some people would make some kind of connections between these. Again, the term magic and magi, don't want to spend much there. Last a few minutes on simply saying there is. So when I was growing up, we wondered, who is De Lawrence? So De Lawrence was an individual who started a company. The picture you see on the screen is actually the website that currently runs. Now, it actually says established in 1892. So they've been around since 1892, clearly not during slavery. Of course, sorry to tell you, that's a picture of one of those guard rings, which regrettably I'm including in the presentation. That's why I prayed St. Michael's angel at the start for protection. These books published by De Lawrence were banned, are banned, continue to be banned, and they are on the list. What's the connection between these? I had one more comment and then I'd stop. During the 70s, there is a wide use of the Lawrence books, and we're told that persons were circulating these books during the 70s. There was a rebirth of an interest in the books of the Lawrence, and this is attributed to scholarship again, and it researched a number of the books, of course, on the list that were banned were being circulated by everyday Jamaicans from across, not Rastafarians, every different type, maybe some people sitting in this presentation this evening. And those books were being circulated. It is established that there are police persons who had a keen interest in, quote unquote, seeking out and arresting people who had and were in possession of these said same books. I would like to propose from my own theory that the Maccabee Bible was associated but was not a book on the Maccabees, was not a book that belonged to any Bible, but was either one of these books or the collection of books, and the title was being used to circulate among persons who wanted to pass around these books on the occult. And if, quote unquote, the authorities for some reason caught up with somebody, the book would never have Maccabees written on it. They would call it. Hence my theory to say, in ignorance and in knowledge, I would say the people who are circulating them would say, Dr. Person, lend me a copy of the Maccabees, and Dr. Perkins would lend me this book, and this book would be entitled The 6th and 7th Book of Moses, which was published by De Lawrence, and have absolutely no title or reference to the Maccabee Bible. And that's where I'll stop. Dr. Perkins.
Mr. Wilkins, thank you very much. I see that you went into apologist mode this evening, and you have given all your audience quite a bit of food for thought. I suspect that people have many questions that they would like to ask you. Could you, to start off, indulge me by just taking some steps back and just briefly explaining to the audience what the occult is in your estimation and why it is to be of concern.
Right.
I ask that because we're now in a different phase in how we relate to written material, and there is nothing that is hidden under the sun or can be hidden under the sun these days. And I say that thinking, for example, 6 and 7 books of Moses, which we recognize to be pseudepigraphical material and all of that, where material is falsely named in order to claim the power or the knowledge or so on of the particular person whose name this material is written under. But none of this material is hidden anymore. You can just go onto the internet and do a search and come up with translations of the 6th and 7th book of Moses. So give us some background into the occult so that people may understand where you're going with that. And then also speak to why should we even be bothered or worried about this occult material anymore when it's so widely available, and what damage is it doing to the world? And then I'll go on to look at some questions that may be showing up in the chat. So just to remind people, if you have questions or comments, feel free to drop them in the chat. If you'd like to pose your question directly, I'll take a count. Just raise your hand using the raise hand feature, which is on the reaction at the bottom of your screen. All right, Mr. Wilkins, do you think?
So, two answers readily on the question. First and foremost, the books have always been widely available. In the United States, in Europe, they've all been widely available. So in this statement of availability of books and these books being hidden, all of these are, in my view, as you have said, different time periods where the definitions were. Even in the discussion, the reference of during the 70s, people, quote, or 60s into the 70s, Black Power books were treated in a like fashion. And we fully well know Black Power books are widely available. So, second point about the occult. It's not my definition. I'm only, again, presenting the material in the text. So I don't make or express issues with the point that is being said of the material content. I'm only using the definitions. So if you go online and look up the 6th and 7th book of Moses, you will see these are books belonging to the category of the occult. And they continue to explain these books are so and so. So in the United States, everybody is free to put up whatever material they want. In Europe, similar fashion. There are differences in different territories about what is deemed to be appropriate and what is deemed inappropriate. And that's, I would say, if we're to have a discussion, my concern would more be the challenges of what material is being foisted on children today, which is inappropriate for their developmental stages. So if there's an issue I would want to be taking is on those people who are foisting material that are psychologically inappropriate for the developmental stages of children. So I would be writing a book on the concerns of the occult today. I would be talking about people who are putting material onto children, which is not part of my study, regrettably. But that's to answer your question. So the issue is not about the occult. The issue is, what are these books? What value do they have? Now, on the other side, in our own Catholic understanding, we clearly differentiate between those materials that are good and wholesome for spiritual growth. And in our understanding, evil exists. The Bible teaches us evil exists. And those who are counter to the will of God are foisting evil. Full stop. So in our own Catholic understanding, in the Orthodox understanding, the Protestant understanding, evil does exist. And if material is produced to facilitate acts that are deemed to be counter to the Christian way of life, one can say we can agree to disagree, but if it becomes a scenario where this material is being promulgated on people in ignorance, they do not know what it is that they're being engaged with, then there is where I would raise the issue. So I do not determine a definition on occult. I'm just using straight from the websites. So for example, it's the Lawrence's website, the books on Amazon that says here is what is the content. I'm not sure whose microphone, maybe it's Sean. So I'm not sure if I've answered your question directly, but let's see if there are other people who have a different of opinion.
I'm not going to press. I don't think this is the space for some of my larger concerns with your answer. But just to say that Kay popped a similar question to mine in the chat. She was asking, if the books are banned, how do the authorities handle the fact that people are able to access these books online? Have you any information or experiences around that? That you
Okay,
might
let's see if we're all on the same page. Everybody. I quoted the Jamaican law that is in place today. Please. That's all I did. I don't make the law. I don't determine what is on the list of the law. So I can't speak authoritatively to who is managing it. Notice I did make the point about the debate that is on, that during the 70s, when Michael Manley took off the quote unquote books on Black Power, that government and subsequent governments today have left the books on the occult on the law books. So I'm not sure if the question is being directed to the right person. All I'm doing is reporting the status quo in Jamaica with the law. And I'm not, again, a lawyer to give any kind. All I know is when I went, researched, asked for the updates, this is what is presently on the books.
So what we can certainly say is that the presence of the internet and the access that we have to scores of all kinds of information makes it very difficult to ban anything at all. And so there is a space for conversation around what that means for what the authorities are able to do or not able to do. We don't expect any necessary authoritative speaking on your part. Nonetheless, let's move along, Noel.
So just a second comment. Yes, Father Hor, please.
Hold on a second. I want to bring in Winston Burton's question, and then
Sure.
Father Horace is free to ask his question afterwards. Just allow me to monitor and maneuver. Winston has placed this question in the chat a little while back. He just wants to know Howell was affiliated with the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, and we just marked that Leonard Howell who is being referred to here is considered to be one of the early Rastas, perhaps even the father of Rastafarianism in Jamaica. And he's asking if he has any affiliation to your knowledge, and if that Howard person that you made reference to is the same person that is connected to Pinnacle. Answer that question, and then we can ask.
So the Pinnacle, definitely yes, but there were two Howells, of course. So yes, this one was the one associated with Pinnacle. Yes, this was associated with Pinnacle being raided by the police on multiple occasions. They seized his books, they burnt. Yes, this is the same Howell in that case. Now, you would want to do a little more reading on the relationship between Rastafari and the Ethiopian Orthodox in Jamaica. What one from the readings I did thought would have been a match made in heaven turned out to have many, many, many problematic challenges on both sides. That's worth extra reading, but it's not a key point of my thesis and my research. But I did come and see that after Haile Selassie visited, there was a thrust establishing a number of Orthodox churches on Spanish Town Road. Groups of Rastafari took an interest. Over time, there seemed to have been a falling out, and numbers dwindled of Rastafari embracing Ethiopian Orthodox. And you would appreciate that there are some key tenets of Ethiopian Orthodoxy that are incongruous to Rastafari. And the first and foremost, obviously, would be, who is Haile Selassie? So on that first point, there were challenges.
All right.
Haile Selassie himself was a member of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. Haile Selassie himself was Christian Ethiopian Orthodox, which also means he held that Jesus Christ was the divine Son of God and was God. That's not necessarily consistent with all Rastafarians who joined up with just the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. I'm not talking about the full group of Rasta. Those were some points that there started to be, let's say, more than tension in that early group. Not a key focus on my research, but I did read around some of it just generally. Deacon, does that help? But let me say clearly again, there are significant theological challenges. And as I said in the previous session, herein how do you address the question of the Ethiopian Orthodox doing prayers for the dead? What would Rasta's response be to prayers for the dead? And that's a tenet within the Ethiopian Orthodox Church.
All right, Noel, Wisdom, Deacon Burton says it does help. So he has gotten something out of that response. We'll ask Father Ward to pose his question, and then we move on to other comments in the chat. Father Ward?
Thank you very much, Dr. Wilkins.
Don't do that to me.
It's called a vision, sir. It's called vision.
I stay in my lane.
And it's simple. Let me start simply, because I want to go on, if time permits, Dr. Perkins, a little bit more about the theological here that Noel just referenced, and he made reference using that word theological maybe 4 or 5 times this evening. Where did you find, or where is your research material located? Any one particular, the Institute of Jamaica, or any whichwhere? You know, just for somebody like myself who would want to dig deeper after these experience encounters with you.
So that's a very sensitive topic you just raised. But simple answer is I put up a list last week of these Rastafari sources, which are standard texts on Rastafari. And as I said, no one of them gives all of the points. So you pretty much have to do the searching. If you're looking for Maccabees, just Maccabees, you have to do the searching. And sometimes a number of the books don't even have Maccabee as one of the indices or one of the lookups in the back. So you actually have to be reading the sections on what is Rasta's view on the Bible or quotes in the Bible to pick out pieces to find this reference. And I think our reason for that is the Maccabees is not, I repeat, in my view, a key central issue in the minds of many Rastafarians. Here's 2 reasons why. Dr. Perkins facilitated my doing an interview with a wonderful academic at university, Rastafari, and we had a great discussion. Won't name her, for the simple reason that she didn't have a clue of what Maccabee Bible was. When I said she didn't know anything at all, and she is full Rastafarian, she is an academic at the highest level. So I would like to say this is something that is in the music. Max Romeo made it very popular. It's repeated. Again, informally, I encountered a number of Rastafarians at different points in time and raised a question about Maccabee Bible. And majority, and most of them were over 50. This is not in a formal way with a text. They actually said, no, tell me about it. What's the connection with it? And the last point to the question you raised. So one Rastafari, which I met online through Twitter, Queenie, actually said her mother told her that the Institute of Jamaica actually has copies of the Maccabee at the Institute. So I get very excited and, of course, then try to track down my contacts at the Institute. And there hasn't been anything from that point that went into my research. That's why I say it's a sensitive topic. I haven't gotten anything from the Institute, but this person insists that they're hiding something at the Institute of the I shouldn't say this publicly, but that's again possibly another one of these statements that are made, quote unquote, unquote, unquote. But I did pursue that actively. I haven't been to the Institute, it was during COVID, but I haven't been back down there to actually search the documents to see so. So I will, as you know, Father, send you my reference lists from the research, but pretty much there hasn't. I went to Tom Redcom Library, and that's where I actually got the copies of the Jamaican law, which they have copies in binders there. And I got people from the House of Parliament to send me copies of the updated version of the law to see if any other changes had been made to that particular law. And up till, you know, the whole process of but the law for me was just to answer the question, was the Maccabee ever listed on it? Dr. Perkins, I think Joy Williams has her hands up.
Yeah, I'm going to go to the chat bit, and there is a question there. I was going to point out, but you went there in how you rounded off your answer. The Father Ward, that a good place for him to start in asking about references, really just to look at your bibliography. And one of the exciting things about how Noel did his research, Father, was that he went into the archives of our newspaper. And it's really surprising what jumps up from there, because that does give you a sense of how the Maccabees was treated and put out there and spoken about in the sort of popular media. That's a good way of looking at it. Did you have a follow-up to your question?
Yes, I did. A comment in terms of the sourcing references. I've been cognizant of his critical reliance on the Gleaner in particular. And there is just in my own mind, not that I've dug into it, a sense of care or caution, maybe even a reservation about his articles in the Gleaner. But that's just my own curiosity at work there. The other I'd like to just posit, Dr. Perkins, maybe for further conversation, is what you dealt with, Noel, tonight, where does the Protestant or be the Anglican Church, be it the Communion, or more particular, the Anglican Diocese of Jamaica and the Cayman Islands, has continued its connection, if that's the appropriate word, with this whole subject area. You did cover it last year, last week, but what I'm just curious about that, and that Dr. Perkins could be for another time conversation.
Sure. We can pick that up at another point.
Yes.
So can I respond to the article? So we found about 40 articles ranging from the 1800s, and it really was a wonderful mix of, and actually planned to just do a collection of the articles as a sub bit of writing. But it ranged from, let's say, archaeological finds. Apparently in the 30s and the 50s, there were some significant archaeological finds in Jerusalem by major scholars, American scholars who were in there. And they found, for example, the Maccabees coins, which was a major find because those coins validated both the time period, that these things are historically accurate, and the fact that the Maccabees were at such a position of authority meaning in control, that they could print coins with their own images, which would have been Jewish coins, quote unquote Jewish coins. So there are archaeological articles, there were articles on music, many articles on Hanukkah, because of course, a relationship between the Gleaner and Jewish heritage, people at the Gleaner may have, but there are a number of articles on Hanukkah explaining the relationship with Hanukkah, and a number of those actual articles actually explaining the actual Maccabees story in them about the battles and the victories in them. There were articles, one that stood out for me was an admiral who fought in the First World War, and he, for some reason, had some relationship, well, with England, of course. Blah, blah. But they had a quotation about him, and it had an association with his burial, and the citation was from the book of Maccabees. Another wartime story was amazing, that this is when the Second World War, and they were giving a speech in the Westminster Abbey, I think, encouraging the armies and the soldiers to go out and fight. And they actually quoted the books of the Maccabees in that speech being delivered in England at the time. And our Gleaner thought it of importance to include in one of the articles of the newspaper. So it was a wide range of different topic areas. Didn't make it into the research, but I later on possibly will just do it as a compilation. Not sure who would be interested to read articles from different years. We're talking about 1917, 1930s. And of course, there are a couple of, yes, I know you would, a couple of letters to the editor. And in more recent time, of course, the articles of Deacon Espute and the debate of each of those, which was in the first presentation that I did, that helped me go like, okay, these articles are really good, because each of these religious persons, the rabbi was given his view of what the Maccabee Bible is, etc., etc. So it's a wide range of articles, didn't make it into the research paper, but I will put that as a compilation. And yes, you will get a copy by all means. Dr. Perkins.
All right, Mr. Wilkins, thank you. Monica had put a comment in the chat from a little while back. She said, I know this is a Bible study tonight, but I read the books of the Maccabees, and what I gleaned is a detailed description of the Jews' survival from depression in times of war. Perhaps what you could do is just quickly recap for Monica the difference between what you did last week and what your intentions were for tonight, so that she can make the distinction, and perhaps if
Great.
Follow up, then we can
So in 10 seconds, Monica, the intention last week was to do a Bible study so that anybody who watches that video can come away with exactly the conclusions you made. Exactly that the books of the Maccabees are historical, theological reflections on how the Maccabees responded to the Greek suppression, and how God faithfully, quote unquote, worked through them to save the Jewish religion. Second book of Maccabees then moves on to say the rest of how they live this out. In the material in the Jamaican context, and I definitely make a distinction, and some people think it's a false distinction, all of the people who have read the Maccabees in presentation number 1 and have related events in the book of Maccabees spell it with 2 C's. Maccabees. All of the people, without exception, who make reference in today's presentation spell it with a Maca, kind of like a Jamaican pronunciation. So when Chavans reports, even though he knows what Maccabees is spelled like, he spells it with 1 C. All of those guys who make an association with De Lawrence and the occult that I quoted today, spell it with 1 C. And for me, that jumped out because I thought it was simply a creolization of the Maccabees. Jamaican patois, Jamaican way of saying Maccabees. But then I noticed distinctively, none of these people quote anything in the book of Maccabees. None of them speak about important points in the Maccabees about being forced to eat pork, which Rastas would associate with, or meat, or the oppression. But many of them make association with the books are being banned because some mystical hidden secret. Each of these references allude to some mystical, spiritual, for which the book of Maccabees, from my reading, does not contain. So my statement is, we're not talking about the same books. And my conclusion is, the people who are speaking of Maccabees fully well know they're speaking about a book or the whole collection of books of the Lawrence. And hence they use this pseudo title simply to cover up that they're reading books of the Lawrence. And that's my thesis and that's my theory. I haven't seen anybody else write it or say it anywhere else. Does that help, Monica? So tonight is not a Bible study. And I tried to make that clear.
Yeah, she said.
And anybody who was concerned about the occult should. So just to say, if there's anybody who is interested to join our regular Bible study in September, regular Catholic Bible study, not on Maccabees, not on the occult, but we will and continue to have a Bible study same time on Monday with the same Zoom link. If you're interested in a Catholic Bible study, you are welcome to join. Just save the link, and in September, we will continue to explore scriptures related to our Catholic faith, and in some cases, the Anglican faith, where we don't differ too much. Right, Father? Does that help, Monica?
Yeah, she says thanks.
Okay, Joy, sorry for keeping you so long. I hope you haven't disappeared. Uh-oh.
Is Joy still with us?
I'm not seeing her on the screen. I hope she didn't get frustrated that she was waiting so long. My regrets. Joy, I hope you...
I noticed Father Horace is giving a big shout out to Monica of Holy Family as a big time enthusiast in the conversation. And she said she's very passionate about it. And she's like wanting to share it very widely in South Florida. So Mr. Wilkins, take some kudos there and know that some wider invitation should be coming. Happy to take any more questions or comments. Feel free to break the pieces down, what you were able to understand and what you weren't. And you can reflect that back on Noel, and that will allow him to more effectively answer your question. Father Ward is thanking you, Noel, for the distinction between the occult and obia. And I think many of us also found that useful, because there is a way that we do make obia into this bad thing, when it's really the way that the enslavers and the colonial masters spoke of what were African ritual practices and ways of viewing the world spiritually that they couldn't understand, and in a lot of ways that they feared also. And hence they try to find ways of blocking it, preventing it, outlawing it, and all of that other kind.
I'd like to again repeat a comment I made. I found it very thought-provoking that Professor Chavans did his interviews, and never once in any of the material he had reflected did any one of his interviewees quote anything at all, not one quotation from the book of Maccabees. That for me was telling, that if nobody ever even mentioned that the Maccabees were forced to eat pork, and Rastafari supports and this reflects us, then that's totally absent from the material I have seen. If it's available and somebody else has seen it, but what I do know is the people who have encountered on my side, who are familiar with the content of the book of Maccabees, like a Dr. Perkins, like a Father Ward, and associated with Rastafari, they make these connections automatically. They say, but Rastafari was persecuted just like the people in the Maccabees. None of the texts speak about that parallel experience. And that for me was an indicator that this Maccabee had very little to do with our Maccabee.
Noel, perhaps part of what's going on there too, which is, I think, also foundational in your study, is the point that you're making that the version of the scriptures that was made available to the our ancestors and certainly post enslavement was a version of the Bible that did not contain the Apocrypha or the Deuterocanonical. And therefore, in a way, we ought not to be surprised that the Rastafarians who revere very much the King James Version of the Bible and even have a sense that there are differences in the Bible and that books have been removed and that there have been this whole long-standing discussion about what should be and what shouldn't be in the Bible and so on, that their instincts about that were very, very right. Their instincts about the need for them to be distrustful about what is being presented to them, because we know what was done. There was a slave Bible in the Americas. Certain passages were removed. The whole idea that the Bible was used as a pacification tool and that kind of thing. So their instincts were pretty strong. Their instincts were on target, even if their instincts may not have been grounded or given expression to what was the actual historical existence of something called a Maccabees Bible that had anything at all to do with the books of the Maccabees. Reasonable comment?
So I find that a reach, but let me tell you why I find it a reach. When you read the material, you will see deja vu, history repeating itself. What do I mean by that in this particular context? When Forsyth writes, he writes with good sound information. But what he writes about is the 4th century, when the books of the Bible were being selected, quote unquote, and in his view as is historically accurate, there are books that were not included in the Bible, and there are books that were included. And the arguments proposed was that it is, of course, the Catholic Church and the European Church that excluded these books because they had these mystical secrets. Now, does that argument sound familiar to you when we get to slavery? Does that again sound to you familiar when we get to the 70s? That's what it sounded like to me, that it's a rehashing of an experience that they know about, and then they place it with the time frame. Now, there's 2 arguments. There are troubles when we get into discussion on this. The slave Bible, historically accurate, does exist. The problem is, it's printed way down into the depths of slavery. It's not a 1700s edition. It's not a 1600s edition. It's almost clear down into the 1790, almost 1800s. So it's not even a tool that was being used from very early. So sorry to bring this up, but I just have to defend why my arguments are so. Here we go again. My arguments before. The original King James Bible existed throughout the whole period of slavery. The whole period. And has only been kicked out in 1827, which is a few short years after what? Before what? Emancipation. And again, it's now attributed that the slave owners pressured so that those books would have been removed in 1827. That's why I say, and people fight with me about it, it's a reading back into history. It's, you know the history, and you're now giving your arguments, reading back in, which is what we do as well in Christianity with many of the events. We're reading back Christian themes back into the Old Testament. But here is why some of this, again, is compelling. One of the arguments is, and I didn't bring this up today, it was seditious to possess the Maccabees during slavery. Sedition, not the books were banned or illegal. Sedition is at this higher level. What do we know? And as you said a while ago, Tacky's rebellion in 1790s jolted the authorities to now take a closer look on what they referred to as this superstition that these people were practicing. Why? Because through the means of these meetings and drummings, they were able to organize a revolt through Tacky using this religious means of communicating. It then became seditious to have material in that content. We're talking about Obia now. Because before, the text that I have read said them think before that it was just for full superstition. We'd have to worry about it. It's when it was now connected to the revolt or whatever we say it is, that's when it now becomes seditious to have those material. Here's the problem we have. The Lawrence, for example, doesn't come around until 18 mash. So none of his books are available during that time period. Are there other books of quote unquote occult available during that time period? Possibly, yes. Some of them manually transcribed. So I argue that too is a reading back into history. The sedition was after the 1790s because of the Tacky revolt. And they're not now saying the religion is the issue. It's the ability to perform a revolt by means of using the means of communication. This is what I saw in the material that I read. I am sure there are others who argue differently on that point.
All right, Noel, we're
Yes, please.
running out of time. And
Yes.
I just want to give you an opportunity to say any thanks that you'd like to say at the end. I was trying to lay hands on our beloved Reverend Bertrand Taylor, but I'm not sure.
He has some problems with the mic.
Okay, there's a problem with the mic, but I'd love him to give us the benediction. But if not, Father Horace is here, and we were all very much taken with his benediction of last week. But why don't we give?
Can we take one more?
Lorraine is asking, and I just think you need to help her to understand about canon and the content of books. She wants to know. She's heard of the 6 and 7 books of Moses and that they were taken from the Bible. So she's asking, are you saying that there are no 6 and 7 books of Moses in the Bible? Hold on. And she says, continuing my question, Noel, to confirm that this is just the name of a book by the Lord. So if you could just explain to Lorraine again.
I love that question. So not only are there books called the 6 and 7 books of Moses, there's a song done by Jamaicans as well as Caribbean. That song was actually done over by a Bayesian group called the very same thing, the 6 and 7 books of Moses. And the irony is when Toots did it in 61, these books were already on the banned list. So Toots knew what he was singing about. The song talks about Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, and us will realize that Moses is dead after the 5th book. Joshua and Judges, Moses is long dead and buried. So Moses does not write the 6th book and the 7th book, full stop, of the Bible. He doesn't. He's dead, buried. So there is no 6 and 7 book of Moses in the Bible. Moses' attribution is to the first 5 books called the Torah. The next 2 are Joshua and Judges, and they are not books of the Bible. There is a book entitled, which is claimed to be going back to Jewish ancestry. However, they've actually said it's no earlier than the 17th century coming out of Germany. So it doesn't even date back to very early times of Jewish writing. So again, these are writings on how to perform spells, how to do all of those conjuring up spirits. This is what the content is actually. And as Dr. Perkins said, and as I found out, you can Google it. So I pray nobody gets too curious that they want to go and read these books, but they're readily available. So none of these books are hidden. And Dr. Perkins, that's the argument that I have, that the argument has been these books are hidden away from black man. And I'll say it again, during slavery, the Maccabees were not hidden away at any point in time. They were available in the Anglican Church, and the Anglicans were reading them during liturgy. So there's no hiding. And the handful of Anglicans who attempted to do any conversions of slaves, if they did much, would have been using those books, full stop. So that's what the whole point of my thesis was. What is the Maccabee Bible? So I end the discussion on the third session to simply say, the Maccabees Bible, for those who know the content, is any standard Bible that contains the books of the Maccabees. Catholic, Anglican Original, King James are now readily available. You can get books with the Apocrypha. Ethiopian Orthodox or Orthodox Bibles have Maccabees. So it depends on who you are. It's just a cultural title. Further.
Dr. Perkins.
Oh, Lincoln wanted. So we'll take Lincoln after 8 o'clock. His one usually takes a longer.
Question, Norman.
Go ahead, Lincoln.
I was just thinking, based upon what you had said, that most of these discussion about the Maccabees came about in the 60s and the 70s. What I want was to ask you, does Marcus Garvey at any time ever associated with the Maccabees in his, or it was long before his time? Because you mentioned about slavery, and Marcus Garvey was against slavery in total.
Right. So the question you ask is more complicated, as you usually ask complicated questions. And here's the reason why. Marcus Garvey was Catholic, so he would have been associated with the Maccabees. My research didn't go into Marcus Garvey and his reading and teachings based on the books of Maccabees, but he would have been familiar with them, full stop. He would have. But I haven't gone to an extensive reading to highlight if there are quotations from Marcus Garvey specifically coming out of the books of Maccabees. But from his Catholic background, he would have been familiar with the books of Maccabees. I could give you that homework, Lincoln. It's not a difficult search.
All right, Noel, there's some other questions and comments in the chat, but unfortunately, we're not going to be able to take those. What I will take is the thanks that has been given to you by several people for your responses and for the presentation. And to add my own thanks and congratulations to you for this evening's presentation and the interaction with everyone that has been with us here this evening. I'm going to ask you if you want to say a word of thanks, please do. And then I'm going to grab hold of Father Horace again and ask him to give us one of his very beautiful benedictions as we take ourselves off of this evening's presentation. Thanks to everyone again for being with us. Noel.
Thank you all for being here. I thank Dr. Perkins, of course, Dr. Reverend Burchell Taylor, and Father Ward and Archbishop Reist for the role, and a couple of special people like Suzanne Lee and Father Philip Omondi. Lorraine, you're always here, and Lincoln. Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate everybody who has taken the time to be here. I will invite, overruling Dr. Perkins, that after Father Ward has done his benediction, I will be here open up until about 8:15 for anybody who wants to continue, and I'll allow the officials to leave gracefully and go and do whatever else they wish to do. And those who wish to spend our usual Monday evening time until about a few more minutes. I will be here and the officials can take leave and do what's good. So I'll take the questions that are in the chat. Father Ward.
Brata, my brethren, brata. Brata. Master God, we come together in, with, and through you. You have brought us thus far through the best of times, and even when we broke loose, the winds of oppression have blown. Still, for all, with you, knowing the way of the cross, been able to stand and to draw upon the diversity of knowledge rooted, expressed in Holy Scripture, very especially over these 2 weeks on the books of Maccabees, have created fear and even used to keep our people down. You lead, you guide, you direct, and that this day yet again we hold on to you, hold on to you. We hold on to you, rock, our solid foundation. Grant us as we go forth to make no peace with oppression, to set us on the way of freedom, the way of justice. Lead, guide, and direct each of us as we go forth, and very especially, Lord, lead and guide your servant Noel, and those partnering with him to do this tremendous work. I'm grateful. We all are in this community now. Come, Holy Ghost, we're there. Lead, Spirit of the living God, for you are our sweetness, and for which we say, thank you, thank you, thank you, nuff, nuff. And may the people of God say, amen, amen, amen.
Amen. Amen. Amen.
Brata time.
Amen.
So bye-bye, Dr. Perkins. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it thousandfold. And anybody else who has other plans, you are comfortable to hit the exit button, and we will just continue for a few more minutes for persons who have questions, and a little more relaxed mode. The camera isn't on. I think we've stopped streaming, so you can freely ask questions at this point in time, or comments, or raise issues. So just to, 2 more comments back to Lincoln. So one of the things, Lincoln, you need to take note of is the relationship between Marcus Garvey and Rastafari is not a two-way street. And what do I mean by not a two-way street? Marcus Garvey was never a member of the Rastafari. Full stop. He was Christian, continued to be Christian, and had his philosophies back to Africa. He had his seeing and his sights about interpreting a Psalm 38, that an emperor would rise from Africa. And he saw in Haile Selassie's rise in 1930 as this prince who had now, and to a far extent, Marcus Garvey himself was supportive of this idea of back to Africa, building Africa, but he was not a Rastafarian. Those who in the early movements of Rastafari made connections between Ethiopianism, which had developed before Marcus Garvey, Howell and a couple of those, were into Ethiopianism, tied into, and saw Marcus Garvey as a prophet who now was foretelling the rise of Emperor Haile Selassie. So to some Rastafari, he is the great prophet. He is one of the great prophets, like Elijah, etc., etc., etc. But Marcus Garvey himself was never Rastafari. So there may be a disconnect in thinking that he would have purported teachings out of the Maccabees, which were picked up by Rastafari. That equation didn't occur in the readings that I've seen on how Marcus Garvey's influence was picked up by Rastafari. But again, I highlight, I am not presenting myself in any way as an authority on the topic. Those were articles that I did read around the whole topic of the relationship. Lincoln, you hearing me? I hope after that chat so much you don't go about your business.
Oh,
Yes, please.
I hear you still. I hear you, man.
Right. So you're here. So you have some homework to look up if there is quotations from Marcus Garvey to do with the books of Maccabees. And my first knowledge is he was Catholic. So he would have been generally familiar with the Catholic Bible and the books of Maccabees. But no, so far, I'm not intense in it. I hadn't seen in any of the Rastafarian books that quote Marcus Garvey, cite Marcus Garvey, any of them relating to the Maccabee Bible.
I know.
Thank you.
Yes, Marilyn.
Just
ahead.
that Marcus, I think, really was Catholic. I recall many years when they brought back his remains in quotes.
Yes,
It was at Cathedral.
that is correct.
When
There's
we
no
went to
question.
church that Sunday morning, it was right there in front of us.
Correct. So
Yeah.
he was, and that's
Yeah, he was
because
Catholic.
I taught a little Marcus Garvey last time to my fifth formers. He did embark on the issues of social justice, and that's where he comes up. History is not just time-bound, but it touches many facets of life that many people may not be able to place their fingers on. Marcus Garvey, Toots, etc., etc. Yes, please. Any other questions that I didn't see so far? So did Kay leave? Okay, she got answers to her questions. Any other thanks for references to JA? Yeah. So one of the points that I'm really making everybody is when you look on the time slots and the data, they don't fit together. So when some comments are being made about Maccabees being available during slavery, they don't fit. And Maccabees being seditious, they don't fit. So that's why I keep arguing. It's a reading back of events, knowing what happened, and then saying, well, these are things that happened with the Maccabees. Any other thoughts, any other questions to do with the Maccabees? That is the primary reason why I did the research, if everybody wanted to know. Originally, it was intended to be a document that any of you who are interested to understand the books of the Maccabees, the background, the history, the cultural context of the books of the Maccabees in the Bible, that was what my primary objective was. But when we're doing the research, they're saying, hey, that's pretty much any standard Bible study. You're doing a master's in Jamaica. Please go and find something related to Jamaica. And then, of course, as you said, Jamaica and Maccabees, it pops up in your face. People are afraid of Maccabees. Yes, Marie?
Noel, you're gonna be emailing out the presentation because I had to leave for a bit.
The video or the PowerPoint?
Well, I was really picking up the video.
Sure. So that is already posted on, that is posted on YouTube already. I was actually watching it while I was talking. So Marie, just go and check on Maccabee Bible, Noel Wilkins. And
Okay.
I guess it's a reasonable request for you all to like it, and not that it's going to do anything I haven't put up. It's on Holy Trinity's website. So if anybody is interested to see it or watch it, all three presentations are up. And the two presentations that I did, one for Father Ward and one for St. Jude's, Father Honeygan, and as being mischievous and misbehaving in those two. So you have to be careful how you watch Father Ward Zone as being very mischievous.
Hallelujah.
So again, Father, as I mentioned in Father's presentation, there is, as you know, a Handel Messiah. Handel also wrote Judas Maccabeus as a symphony. And I forgot to mention this, that in 1980, the Jamaica Philharmonic actually performed that symphony of Judas Maccabee in Jamaica, in our Jamaican symphony. And that was one of the articles that was in the Gleaner that was saying the Maccabees, the symphony had a good turnout, a wide audience was there to listen to Handel's Judas Maccabeus. That was again one of the articles that I located. More just reporting on the event as a. Any other questions while you're here? Please feel free to put it in chat.
Dr. Wilkins, and you can run from that doctorate. The hound of heaven will still pursue you, sir.
Mrs. Lee, please protect me.
Two fast considerations, FAST. Speed. One, you made reference to relating all of this to children. The Maccabees to emerging generations. Is there that you're aware of any materials available to emerging generations? I'm talking about young, children.
I haven't checked, so I will look. That isn't difficult to find because that really is looking under again my portfolio of Catholic catechesis on the books of Maccabees for children. I would not be surprised that the converse, if I remember correctly, yes, the converse does exist, that there is Jewish material on the Maccabees and Hanukkah for teaching children. I just remember I did see Jewish teachings for children on Hanukkah, which spoke to, of course, the relevance of the Maccabees to the event. But I would check for the Christian side.
I ask, trying to make connection here because that yes, as older or more mature, we need to what we have done to confront our fear of biblical reality that deals with everyday life, but also to help the next generation to overcome the fear in moving forward, because the book of the Maccabees really contributes significantly, I believe, at least for me, to a growing sense of who we are as persons in Christ, liberated, out of an exodus and a resurrection. But also to be able to deal with, in the case of Jamaica, an continuing emerging nation, and how we deal, with the forces, the legacy of colonialism, create a greater, more strident, developing, dependent nation. So that's significant for me. I thank you.
And that's why you hear me speaking about emancipation theology, Caribbean emancipation theology. So Vivian, sorry, I didn't see the question and I will not pretend to overlook your question. So Vivian's question is a reasonable question. We read books to gain knowledge. What are the dangers in reading some of these banned books for the purpose of plain knowledge? So there are 2 points that so in our regular Bible study, we do have 1 or 2 persons who read the PSEU, DIGRA, PHA, pseudographic books. So that's books that were written and available on the internet. They don't belong to any of the Bibles. So not even the Ethiopian Orthodox has some of these books. And they are books written by people in different time periods. So the question is, what is the dangers? I like to answer this. For me, persons that are at different stages of their faith journey. And I would advise the persons who are at the learning side of their faith journey, the side where they are learning to discern and differentiate what contributes positively to your Christian faith, to learn those things relating, and for the Catholics, 73 books to get through first. I say, get through those 73 first before you start reading books that don't contribute positively to your faith. Here's why I say don't contribute positively. Many of them, as we saw with the Da Vinci Code, many of you who are old enough, these are books that are out there and available, but they provided for us who were teachers of the faith at the time a tremendous need for us to now go and explain much of the misinformation. Why is it misinformation? Because these are books that are really written 300 years after the time of Christ, had been influenced by non-Christian thinking. So a kind of mix and match of different philosophies, which is called Gnosticism. Now, most people say, but there's no danger in that. And here's my response to you. There's 40,000 different Christian denominations today. Not all of them teaching the same thing. Are they all truth? And for the persons who belong to them, they are. And that's the danger of not just having the regular Bible that many of these 43,000 are reading, and some of them only the 66, much less other material that is a mix and match of Christian ideas with philosophical ideas outside of Christianity that are counter to Christian thinking. So, Vivian, that would be my answer. If I had teenagers, I'd introduce them to some books at some stages in their life. And when I've seen that they've gained the maturity to discern certain things, I would then introduce other books to them. And so too, I say in the Christian journey, when people have grown in discernment where they know their faith so that they can discern for themselves what is truth from what is not. And that's just being Orthodox Catholic. Yes, Vivian.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Noel.
Right.
I'm grateful.
Yeah, man. So I wasn't trying to overlook the question. I just didn't see it in the chat.
Yes, man, no problem.
All right. So Vinette is also commenting, a few light bulbs went off. That's remembering grandmother and older folks speaking in sotto voce, re Maccabees, the Lawrence mystery. I totally believe so. And Vinette, my theory is your grandmother and other people knew they were reading the Lawrence books. They knew it, but they referred to it as Maccabees. So some of them were knowledgeable of what they were reading, and hence would say to other people, look, Pickney, you're not for read this yet, because they knew what they were reading. And there are other people who are ignorant, the ones who are just told, no, you're not for read this, but never told that these are books that are, quote unquote, occult, which is not your Christian belief. So I don't define occult, I'm only saying what it professes to be. And what it professes to be is not what we hold as Christian. If you're Catholic and Anglican and traditional Orthodox Christians. Please, I'm hoping that we will get a little more questions and dialogue as we spend a few other minutes. Anatole, I didn't get to say. Please, feel free, anybody. Yes.
Just as I said, this is Monica, just as I said before.
Yes, please.
about the Maccabees Bible, I'm saying a special thank you because you enlightened my darkness. I've never read the book. And you have me now reading the
Yes.
entire book of the Apocryphy,